up, everybody? Thanks for watching the Money Show today. And today we got a really cool guest, an aspect of investing that I think you probably have never thought about, that I think you're gonna freaking love. I know I have already, and it's this thing called tiny houses. You've seen the TV shows, maybe watched some of those television where they have these weird, unique, like 200 square foot houses or 300 or 400 square foot houses, and they live in them or they rent them. Today on the show, I'm gonna bring in Brian Hawkins from at Tiny House Movement, who last year sold over 400 of these tiny houses to investors or even homeowners just like you to live in them. So we're going to talk about how do you make tiny homes an investment? What does that look behind the scenes to a guy that did over 400 of them last year? Brian, thanks for being on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Drew. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, this is a totally new concept to me, tiny homes. And before we even start, I don't think I could live in a tiny home. I just want it on the table right away.
I'm going to throw on the table, I don't live in a tiny home.
Okay, good.
So you're
like,
okay.
What, how tall are you, 6?
I'm not quite 6'4".
You're almost 6'4".
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're dating a profile, you're 6'6".
Uh-huh.
I got you.
Yep.
Yeah, I understand that works.
On my rookie card.
Yeah, on your rookie
6'6".
card, it says
yeah.
6'6". So you got into this random niche market called tiny houses.
Dude, I mean, nobody grows up wanting to be a tiny house builder, right? Like, that wasn't on the job application anywhere.
Like, when you were in high school, you didn't have this idea that said, dude, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to build small miniature houses and I'm going to sell them. That never went through your brain in high school.
No, I actually went to school thinking I was going to be a geologist. Like, that was what I thought I was going to get into.
Wow,
was geology.
that took a turn.
So naturally shifted from there to construction of really small homes.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it went.
Let me back up for a second here, just for the guests get to know you a little bit. What was it like growing up, Brian? If you backwards a little bit, poor family, rich, what was it like growing up?
So we were kind of middle class, right? Like both of my parents were extremely poor and impoverished situations.
Okay.
My dad grew up on a small island in Alaska and then in Portland, Oregon, and my mom grew up in Perry, Florida. And everybody hunted gators. Like, that was literally what they did as a family. My mom's mom moved out to Oregon answering as literally a mail order bride, like a classified ad.
Shut up.
Because her husband had passed away in a car crash.
No way.
And it was just her and her 3 girls. And they moved out to Oregon, and that's how they met. That's how my parents met. Was years later. They were both teenagers, and they met, and it went from there. But they both grew up in just horrible circumstances. My dad's dad was a professional boxer that gambled away all of his money and then turned logger, right?
Okay.
So he had that profession. And so they went from that my dad went into the oil field and started working for a couple of different organizations, but coal mining and coal-fired power plants.
Okay.
So he got transferred around a couple places. So I started in Portland, Green River, Wyoming, and then Bakersfield, California. Just creme de la creme of where you want to live in this life, right? But from there, it was kind of, a typical middle-class situation. And then a little bit later on, like after I graduated high school, my parents' business took off and they wound up in a much better financial position.
Really?
But typically kind of growing up, we were just kind of your typical, middle-class family.
So growing up, your parents grew up very poor.
Mm-hmm.
But when you grew up, when they were together, it was more middle class.
Yeah.
Blue collar.
Yep.
Not wealthy, but just right kind of in the middle there. But then later on, it sounds like they started a business. Were you out of the house at that point?
Yeah, so that really started my senior year in high school. In California, they've had rolling blackouts for decades, right?
Right.
Energy has always been a problem because of the population. How that energy is produced was always an issue as well. So now, for example, coal-fired power plants, the state and government have put that out of business, and everybody turned to biomass.
Right.
When I was a senior in high school, so that was 99, 2000, they were putting the particular power plant that he was working on there in Bakersfield was being put out of business. They were being told, we're going to have to shut this down. All the kilowatt hours that we're using here are going to have to be transferred somewhere else. So he decided to go to the owners and say, if there is a way to make this happen where we can not only save everybody's jobs, but keep this open, I want my cut. I want a percentage to get my name on the card, right? To get on the table. So they all laughed at him and told him, that's great. You can ask for whatever the heck you want because it isn't going to happen. We've all done what we can. It's not going to happen. So he had to go borrow the money, made it happen, saved the plant, saved everybody's jobs, paid the loan off within 2 years.
It's like a movie, dude.
It was
like an employee comes
all of this is
company.
happening. Like, I had no idea, right? Like, as a senior in high school, like, I don't ask those questions. I have no idea what he's going through. But he essentially leveraged everything that they had.
Yeah.
And he's probably done that a couple of times that I don't even know about. But he leveraged everything that he and my mom had worked for to put themselves in a position of ownership as opposed to just running kind of as a general manager for the operation.
I love that. Like even when you talk about it, dude, I get like just excited. We talk about the ability in America to be able to leverage everything, go out there and take your own swing at the plate.
Yeah.
And sometimes you make it and sometimes you don't. But at least I'm the type of person that I want my fighting chance to make it on my own. And I love that we have that in America. And hopefully we get to keep it that way in America. Of the process of like what your dad did, which is taking that risk and putting it on the line. And sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't. But
yeah,
it's the ability, it's the right to be able to go do that. That
yeah,
I
and they
love, man.
I mean, they both coming from their humble circumstances, they were okay with that, right? Like they know they could survive in humble circumstances anyway.
Right.
Which probably made it a little easier. Probably more so for my dad than my mom. She's a little more realistic. And I've inherited a bit more of my dad's. If I have a vision, like I'm going to go for it, no matter how dumb it sounds to everybody else.
Like tiny house.
Just like tiny houses, man. Yeah.
So let's talk about tiny house for a second here. How did you like? I didn't. It's one of those careers that do you just kind of naturally fall into it? Like, how did you get into? I'm going to build. I think you started off as a builder. Yeah. Into tiny houses. How did you? Tell me the background of that story there. How did you get into it?
There's definitely not a natural fit. Construction wasn't even my background. So I was working for a home security company and was selling for almost a decade. And my brother-in-law is a general contractor.
Okay.
And was building homes and had a friend of his that has probably a couple hundred acres in Montana.
Okay.
Just wanted a place to bug out to a couple times a year, just a small cottage-style setup, right? He asked my brother-in-law to build that for him, and I was just helping my brother-in-law a couple hours a day. Like after work, I would just go help him put the floor in. We had the bay door open on our shop, which was right here in Linden, just because we didn't have air conditioning. It was really hot. Like we just had to keep the thing open. Somebody stopped in and asked us what we were building. What is this random thing you're putting on wheels? And I started to do a bunch of research and found out nobody's building these. There's a huge market for it. There's a huge demand.
Is just for my sake and for the viewer's sake? Is this before it was like popular on TV? That you
yeah, it was about 8 years ago.
Okay, so this is right about the time it started initially coming out on TV.
Yeah, I mean
right before that.
We definitely weren't the first people to ever build a tiny house.
Sure.
But it was not mainstream, right? Like there weren't 10 different
popular
TV shows about it, anything else at that point.
Yeah.
But there was enough research that I could do online to find out that there were people across the country, a lot of grassroots movements
happening.
About
How
tiny
old
homes
were
going
you when this was happening?
31.
So you're 31 years old.
Yeah.
So you were with your brother-in-law. You guys are building this tiny house, let's call it. I don't know if he even called it that at the time, but
I don't know what we called it at the time.
But you built this tiny house, right, for your buddy, a buddy of his in Montana, for his acres to go bug out on sometimes.
Yep.
And then that's just how it kind of develops. You see the opportunity or the missing gap there, and move into it.
We after that experience, we had a couple other people randomly stop by the shop and start asking questions, and that's when I got really serious about it and started to scare the heck out of my wife, being like, "This might be something I'm going to go do." So after talking to my brother-in-law, because his side was the background of construction, like that was not my forte. I had to learn all of that stuff on the job as we went. I just told him, like, I'll handle the sales and marketing, you handle the construction. Let's build some freaking tiny houses.
Okay.
So we literally both quit our jobs and started building tiny houses full time. I went and got our first customer, which was out of Texas, just outside of Austin. Went and grabbed our first customer, paid cash for the home, we built it, and then I just kept finding new customers.
Yeah, I mean, I sold you two in my office today.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Everybody walk by, I'm like, hey, you're going to buy a tiny home right now.
Yep.
And so you guys, so are you and your brother-in-law partners right now? Still partners?
We're not. So he, when we closed down shop here and we decided to start mass producing, he didn't want to do that anymore. Like, he just didn't want to be in the shop anymore, handle the physical hammer and nail anymore. So he decided to go do something else and get more into hunting on his side.
Okay.
So he works in that field.
So you right now you're the full-time owner of your, what's the business called?
It's Tiny House Movement.
You call it even the business that, not just your handle on Instagram, but your whole business, right?
Everything revolves around that.
Right?
Yep.
And so at Tiny House Movement, right?
Yes.
So just as a quick plug, if you guys want to follow him, go to Instagram. That's your main platform right now that you communicate the most on is Instagram.
Yep.
At Tiny House Movement on all the different handles. Your TikTok, though, one was different. Your TikTok was...
Yeah, TikTok is just my name. It's Brian.Hawkins.
Brian.Hawkins. And that's where you do a lot of dancing at?
Yes, all the time. Dancing, singing.
Yeah.
Anything I can do to embarrass myself.
Perfect,
all that good stuff.
All right, so you start this business of tiny houses. You're 31 years old. What was your wife's thoughts when you're saying, hey, I'm going to quit my job? I mean, every entrepreneur has to go through this, right?
Yeah,
like that conversation if they're married?
She already had a sense. I mean, we had already been married. Yeah, we had been married for 10 years at that point. She had a pretty good sense of my, I guess, more entrepreneurial spirit, right? That I would get Google-eyed about something, and like that's all I could think about. I was infatuated with that. It scared her to death because this was even more unknown of a market. Like nobody knew what tiny homes were. How the heck was I going to go sell them? Like there wasn't a blueprint of any kind that I could go follow. So she definitely had her concerns, which were all extremely valid.
Very
but she
real
was
concerns.
She was very supportive and just you know whatever we got to do, let's do it. Yeah. So I lucked big time lucked out in that department that she was willing to go down that roller coaster with me.
Obviously on the show, man, I try to keep it as authentic as real as possible. Were there any tough moments where you guys argued, and she was "Dude, Brian, you've lost your brain on this one"?
Yes. When we would have, I mean, as you're going through and building, which I'm sure happens in any business, but as you're building that business, you make mistakes. When you're building a home and you make a mistake, you got to go fix it.
Right.
But when you're building a tiny home on wheels, that home could be in Philadelphia, it could be in Cape Cod, it could be in Texas, anywhere, right?
Yeah, sure.
So whoever we sell that home to, if there was ever a problem, I now got to jump on a flight and go head out there and fix the problem.
Yeah.
So there were plenty of times where something would happen, or somebody that we had hired to do something for electrical or plumbing or some small aspect of the home. If we were trying to get the home done quickly enough that we had to go hire out for help, and something went wrong, it's on us, it's not on them, right? So we still have to go fix that. So there were plenty of times where we had an issue with the home, and I would go home and explain to my wife, like, hey, I got to go take off for a couple of days. And,
Wisconsin or wherever it is.
Yeah, just wherever the heck that is. And she would ask, why are we doing this? Why are we spending money for you to go fly out somewhere to fix a home that shouldn't have been messed up in the first place?
Yeah.
And again, a great question. It definitely should have been messed up.
You got any advice for those that are watching that are husband and wives that go through that? How do you deal with it? How do you succeed from it?
It takes, like for us, it takes a lot of practice, a lot of communication. So for me, what I found out was what goes on in my head that I verbalize makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. Right? Like I understand what I'm trying to explain, but just because it makes sense in my head doesn't mean it makes sense in my wife's head.
Sure.
And vice versa. So for us, it was trying to explain the same thing 3 or 4 different ways to make sure we were both on the same page about how we move forward. But more than anything else, it's wanting to do that together. Like always no matter what's going on outside of that, wanting to be on the same page together so that as you move forward, you eventually get on the same page.
I think that's a great point because I think, especially as a visionary, which I kind of see your entrepreneurial spirit, that googly eyes you talk about, right?
Crazy,
like, we get these, like, I'm the same way, man. I get these like crazy ideas, right? And I think especially when you're a person that has that type of visionary type of mindset, in our brain, it totally makes sense what we're talking about. Like, how could you not understand this concept of what I'm explaining to you? But I think there is a massive gap between, like, especially on entrepreneur in general, but especially on visionary entrepreneurs, to someone who's not an entrepreneur, who you're coming home to, who's been with kids all day and wants to spend time with you, and you're now saying, hey, great news, I'm leaving for Rhode Island tomorrow to fix a deck on a house that I sold 6 months ago. I can see how that communication would be freaking massively important there.
It's a big deal. Like my wife's background, her parents, her mom was a stay-at-home mom. She's number 8 of 11 kids in her family. And her dad was a roofer. He had the same job for 40 years. Like just always did the same thing over and over and over again. Yeah. And would travel around to a few different places. So when you're starting something new and you don't know what you're doing all the time and you're trying to like make sense of it in your head, having to explain that to your spouse as well as a whole other subject.
Okay, so I want to spend some time with you on now the tiny houses, and I want to get behind the scenes with you for the viewers especially, and we can come at it from like maybe 2 different angles. Number one, how tiny houses work if someone just wants to buy in it and like live in it. Because again, I'm not in this world, but I guess there's a whole world of just tiny home livers, if you call them that. They just buy it and live in it. That is their home, and that's where they live. And then there's also the investment side, which I think maybe a lot of viewers would like to know that side as well, of how do you turn tiny homes into an investment. And I love the investing side because it ties, I think, mainly back into a little bit of the Airbnb side, which is super, to me, sexy. Kind of a new industry that's taken off there. So let's back up a little bit. Talk to me about Airbnb. I mean, not Airbnb. Talk to me about tiny homes. How does someone, let's go from a homeowner standpoint first. How would someone go about buying a tiny home?
If you're going to buy a tiny home, you have to decide what's really important to you. Okay. So there's just a couple things that you have to focus on. Number one, decide what it is that you cannot live without, no matter what.
Okay.
Because if you're living in 400 square feet or less, you're going to see everything every single day. It's got to be multifunctional. You don't have a ton of space.
Okay.
So decide what it is that you need no matter what. The other is decide what you can live with that you're comfortable with. So paring down the amount of shoes you have, the amount of clothes you have, your collectibles, pictures, like everything has its space.
Right.
So you need to decide what you use every single day. The size of fridge that you want, the microwave that you want, the oven that you want. Do I need countertop space? Do I need a desk space? And then the last thing is decide if you're working from your home.
Okay.
If you're going to work from your tiny home, you need a dedicated workspace in there.
Okay.
Even if it's just 2 feet away or it's an extension of the countertop,
right.
You need a dedicated workspace.
So those are the top 3 things that someone should look at. They're trying to buy a tiny home, what they should start designing out and thinking through to buy one. Dude, I have like 1,000 questions from there because like my brain, like there's so much OCD I have, like I can't, I don't even know, like you just saw my closet of baseball cards of unopened boxes.
Awesome, by the way.
I don't think I could keep those in my tiny house because there's like no space.
No, you would need a tiny house for your collection of cards.
Yeah, so a tiny house, how many square feet are we talking that a normal tiny house is?
The average tiny house is 300 square feet.
300 square feet, so that's 10 by 30 or 15 by 15,
yep.
Right? 300 square feet you're going to hit. Oh, dude, that's my bedroom right now I think is bigger. Just my bedroom I think is bigger.
Like the average house in the United States I think is 2,300 square feet.
Right.
So when you go from that to a hotel room, right? Like essentially the hotel room nationwide is 300 square feet, right? Like that's the average. So think of what you would take with you if you were moving out of your house into a hotel room.
Into a hotel room.
But it's skinnier than that, especially if it's on wheels.
And I know I'm going to ask some very novice questions here, so just roll with me on these. And probably those that don't watch it that don't know. I'm assuming in these that you build, you can build like a full bathroom. I thought of a hotel room.
Oh yeah.
That. Like a full bathroom, you put tubs and everything into them. Have you ever put like a jacuzzi into one before? I
haven't put a full jacuzzi. We do a couple of different types of tubs. I mean, you can do your typical tub is 5 feet long and 2.5 feet wide. That's pretty standard. Most people want a tub. They don't just want a shower. Okay. But there are people that build a home that's only 20 feet long. 8.5 feet wide, 20 feet long.
That's not 300?
No, that's not 300 at all. But that's about 140 square feet.
What's wrong with them?
They just want a house they can haul around wherever they are, man.
Yeah,
like to them, a house is just a place to lay down at night.
Is that what it is? Is it a mental thing? Like, they just look at it totally from a different perspective?
There are a lot of people, especially younger generations, that look at a home very differently than I did growing up. Like to me, when I grew up, the aspiration was to have, the mansion or that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Like you wanted as much space as possible. Now people are very conscious of their carbon footprint, how much energy, how much waste they're putting into the environment, and then they also just want something that they can bug out to that's not a burden on them financially, emotionally, mentally. Most people buying tiny homes are either in their early 20s or they're in their late 50s or 60s, because you have your empty nesters that don't want the yard of maintenance anymore, just want to travel around like an RV, and then your first-time home buyers that don't want to handcuff themselves to a 30-year mortgage or a $400,000 starter home, and they want to spend 75 grand on a tiny home instead.
So maybe these people are way smarter than I am. Then. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong way.
Dude, it's all relative, man. Like some people are really into the experiences. Like I want to go travel, I want to go check out every national park, I want to visit X country and wherever else. And I just need a place to be able to put my stuff. So that's what the tiny home serves for me. So
give me an idea here, because we were talking about in tiny homes. You have tiny homes that you build from scratch, 2x4s, it is literally a tiny home, a miniature home, if you will. It looks like a home from the outside. But then you have the storage container world, you have the treehouse world, the glamping world. Are all those kind of wrapped into or underneath the umbrella of tiny world or tiny homes?
Yeah, I mean, container homes in particular are definitely treehouses. Tiny homes is a very relative term, right? Like realistically, if you're going by the grassroots definition, it's 400 square feet or less.
That's the definition of tiny home.
Yeah, but a lot of people, they think 1,000 square feet is small or tiny, right? So it's definitely a relative term, but typically it's 400 square feet or less. But tree houses fall under that. Container homes definitely fall under that. Typically glamping tents or yurts or those kind of things aren't really tiny homes, but again, any small space really falls under that umbrella.
Kind of falls under it. You focus on, as far as selling, building, et cetera, manufacturing, you guys focus on just the tiny homes, like the tiny home.
Yep, we're definitely more tiny homes that are on wheels, park model RVs. We also do container homes.
Okay, so now just for definition of a newbie here, does a tiny home have to have wheels, or could a tiny home not have wheels?
It does not have to have wheels.
Okay.
Again, it kind of depends on what definition you go with.
Okay.
The traditionalists that are into some of the crazy that you see on TV, right? Like with what tiny homes are in those shows, is on wheels.
Okay.
So most people consider a tiny home something that's on wheels. But realistically, there are a lot of tiny homes built that are put on a slab on grade or a foundation, or they're put on footings or pillars, depending on where you are. Like if you're building a 2 or 3 container home out in the middle of nowhere, or it's up on a hillside, you're not going to put that on wheels.
Right.
You're going to put that on footings depending on the landscape and how much excavation you have to do. So it changes depending on where you're going to put that home.
So there's like 2 different styles here from understanding it. One style is like, and maybe this is a style that I was originally thinking of saying, man, that would be crazy, but would be you have this lot, you know, you live in ABC state, you have this lot of land, right? It could be a half acre. You build a tiny home instead of a regular home. You drop it on this lot on a concrete slab, hook it up, and that's your home. Just like every other house in the neighborhood is a home. It's just yours is 320 square feet versus 3,200 square feet.
Yep.
And someone would use it straight up just as like their normal home. And then the other side of it is it's on wheels, and they're taking it to RV park to RV park to RV park.
Yeah, that's one of the issues that tiny homeowners have across the United States in particular. Not everybody wants to live in an RV park or a KOA or a mobile home park, right? Like they want that tiny home on wheels so they can still travel with it occasionally.
Okay.
But they don't want to live a nomadic lifestyle. They don't want to live in a trailer park. They still just want to be in a residential neighborhood.
Okay.
That's kind of the catch-22 with tiny homes on wheels right now, is finding a place that you can legally put them, but still have access to utilities for water, power, and sewer to hook up to. That's similar to an RV.
Are again, totally not newbie here. Are tiny homes on wheels, are they allowed to go into RV parks?
Most of them, but it depends on if they've been built to that standard.
Okay.
So not all of them are built to the same code as an RV is. RVIA is that certification, and they'll send out, so depending on who that builder is and if they've gone through the proper channels, they're set up as an RVIA certified builder.
Right.
They'll have stickers that they put on the trailer itself. So if somebody pulls into an RV park, that's one of the things they'll check, is to see if it has that sticker.
Which would allow them to go into the RV park and set up. I know a lot of RV sometimes will had the Jergies on the show.
Yeah.
Right. And I think you guys know each other.
Yeah, they're awesome.
And they were telling some stories of how in their RVs sometimes they would go to a Walmart parking lot when traveling and stay in they stay in like the Walmart allows them to stay there. I guess I'm just trying to figure out the difference between a tiny home on wheels and an RV. Can a tiny home on wheels go park at a Walmart, hook up, and stay a night or two while they're traveling through?
You definitely can. The biggest difference is just an RV already has the motor in the actual unit itself, right? Like, so it's built on that same chassis as the rest of the house.
Yeah.
The tiny home, you're having to haul that around. Whether it's a gooseneck or a fifth wheel style hitch, you still need a different vehicle to haul that around. But like where you would stay at, there's plenty of people that do that.
Do RV people dislike tiny world people and vice versa?
I don't know that there's like a real clash between them, but there are definitely some. Sure.
I would like to start a Facebook group to
decide. We could do that, dude. Yeah, who's better?
Yeah, who's better, the RVers or the tiny world?
Dude, you got to put school buses in that too, then.
That's true. They have school buses that are like taking off right now.
Yeah.
Of everybody. But that's a little bit more of your DIY people. Is that
yeah,
right?
I mean, those are. I mean, buying a school bus, and they call them schoolies, right? Like if you convert your school bus into your home, and there's a lot of that goes around as well. But for the same reason as an RV, like you have your engine already attached to that chassis, you can go where you want. But that is an up and coming market in the tiny home world, or schoolies.
It's schoolies.
Yep.
Okay, let's go back to tiny world homes just for a second. Can you give just me, viewers, ballpark idea price points of how this thing works in tiny worlds? Is this a $20,000 home, a $5,000, $100,000? Well, just give me a ballpark. What does it look like?
If you're going to go have somebody build it for you, the average builder is about $75,000 for a tiny home. If you're looking for really high-end, customized, it's completely off-grid, solar systems, backup batteries, the whole nine.
All of that?
It's more like $150,000.
Wow.
Solar is still the most expensive piece to a tiny home.
Okay.
Because like on a residential home, people are spending anywhere from like $20,000 to $50,000 on their solar system, right?
Right.
The problem is on a tiny home, you're still spending $15,000 to $20,000 on a solar system.
Okay.
But you're using less than a tenth of the kilowatt hours you use on your regular house. The amount of money that you're going to save on a solar system is extremely minimal on a tiny home.
Yeah.
But if you're out in the middle of nowhere, it's the only option you got.
Okay.
So if you want something completely customized, off-grid capable, all that stuff, it's probably more like $150,000. But if you want to do it yourself, there's a lot of people that like to just build the homes themselves as well. It's more like $10,000 to $20,000.
If you just want to go start building a home, go buy wood from Home Depot and start building a tiny home.
I mean, now that wood's gone crazy at Home Depot, it might be a little more expensive. But typically, you can definitely build a home for $10,000.
A tiny home.
Yeah.
But when you're starting getting into like, if I want an actual really nice tiny home, if I built it, it would come crooked and not work and be functional. So if I was going to buy one from a manufacturer, I'm looking at somewhere between 75 to 150 grand, depending on how customized I want that tiny home.
Yes.
Okay. Now go to the investing side for it. This is where I get really, really excited. How do I, as an investor, take a tiny home and turn it into an investment? How is that world taking off?
That world has taken off tremendously. In 2019, 2020, like really it just started a couple years ago.
Okay.
People figured out that having a unique space that's near any type of tourist destination, national park, amusement park, like whatever it is, right? Like just having a unique space, people want to be able to say they've stayed in a tiny home.
Yeah.
So they love that it's that kind of niche and a new experience for them. But we started building those homes specifically for rental spaces. So you design them a little differently.
Okay.
There's safety aspects that you want to make sure are in place when you have hundreds of people going through on an annual basis versus living in it full time.
Okay.
So you want to design the home a little differently. But the amount of homes that we had went from doing 10 to 15 homes a year to hundreds of homes a year because people found out that they could rent these things out and make money off of their home. So if you have land that's sitting around somewhere that you think you could rent that bad boy out, tiny homes are a phenomenal option because people aren't running through a hotel lobby, especially with COVID and the pandemic and everything else. They're a fantastic option. Anywhere near a national park, you're at least looking at a 55% occupancy rate on an annual basis.
Okay, so let me go through it. So on rental side, you're not talking about you're renting these out long-term rentals where someone's signing a lease for a year on a tiny house. It's more of the Airbnb model where they're using it as a hotel, let's say, where they're coming in for a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, 5 days, 3 days, one night, staying at them.
Yeah,
that's mainly what's happening on the investment side.
Absolutely.
Okay. On the investment side, let's break it down into a little bit of categories here. If I have a house, right? Let's say it's on a half-acre lot, right? Whatever it is, and I just want to drop a tiny home in my backyard, like one, and use it as Airbnb from here until I sell my house again. Are people doing that model?
Yeah, and that gets a little trickier because depending on where you're located, each municipality is going to have their own code and what they allow you to put in your backyard, which also determines the type of tiny home you would have.
All right.
So depending on where that is, they may or may not allow you to have a home on wheels. It might have to be on a foundation or hooked up to a foundation, which is still an option. You could definitely build a small space, a tiny home to that spec. You just need to decide which one works best for you, that you're not going to have the city come and tell you that you have to take that thing out of there.
Are HOAs clamping down on that one too?
Yes. Not as much as the cities are. Like cities are trying to find a way to solve their affordable housing crises, right? Nationwide and really worldwide. And outside of the United States, a tiny house is just a regular house.
Yeah.
Like that, I mean, everybody's been living in small spaces forever.
Right.
We're used to wide open space. So depending on where you live, tiny homes are great for a backyard mother-in-law apartment, an Airbnb, a home office. There's a lot of different ways to use them. It just really depends on your exact municipality as to what's allowed there.
Now going to like this concept you're running with, or however you want to share it with, almost making a tiny home park. Maybe I call it that for a second.
Yeah.
Where an investor is coming in and putting 20, 30, 40, 50 tiny homes on one lot, and then Airbnb all these things out, right? How does that work?
So there are a couple that we have done where people are retrofitting an RV park, for example. The pads are already in place, utilities are already in place. They've taken out all the older homes and they just want something that looks new but still has that same density. So it allows them, if they only have a couple acres, they can still fit 30 or 40 homes on a couple acres.
Right.
So they've been really popular for that reason, that from a density standpoint, you can get a lot of capital into that small space. But they're also renting really well because they hold their value well. They're built like a traditional home as far as IRC code that they're built to. And they look like a home. They don't look like a standard manufactured home from the 70s.
Right.
So it's made a big difference for people from the eye test to say, okay, yeah, I can see myself living in that, or even just renting it for a week or a month at a time. And from an investment standpoint, if you got somebody that's willing to be there and you can get almost double what you could in a manufactured home, makes all the sense in the world.
So are these investors just buying a lot of land, not a lot of land, but a lot of land of 5 acres, let's say, whatever it is, right? And then dropping in, going to someone like you and saying, hey, I want 50 tiny homes. And are they kind of building like their own little subdivision neighborhood of tiny homes? And have a street or something in them, or however it works, and then sit there and Airbnb out that entire neighborhood nonstop?
Yes.
It's like an Airbnb neighborhood, basically.
It's a tiny home community, right? Like just like
That's crazy.
Cities will call them pocket neighborhoods.
Okay.
Right? Like you try to put something that's kind of unique that doesn't fit what the traditional residential is
Is it a
around
special
it.
zoning that they have to go through, or is it?
Sometimes, usually for tiny homes in particular, you want at least a medium density residential.
Okay.
I mean, if you can get a high density, that's great, just because you're fitting more homes in there.
Okay.
But from the customer standpoint, they also don't want, they don't want to share walls with people. So having anywhere from at least 15 to 20 feet of space in between homes, at least still gives you that sense of ownership and pride that I can plant my own garden, I can park my car here, I can wash my car, whatever, outside of my home. But it's just a small space that's unique and it's your own.
This is a totally new world to me that
It's
my
very
brain is
different.
running on, man.
Very different.
Could an investor, is it on the profit side of it, have you seen it before where an investor is literally just running a tiny house Airbnb community? I guess what it would be, right? They would put like 25 homes up, all tiny homes, and Airbnb all 25 of them out. They would maintain the flowers. They would maintain, meaning they, the owner, would be maintaining that kind of, right? And then they're just sitting there on Airbnb renting these things out. Has anyone done that before?
Yeah, there's actually a decent handful of that going on around the country right now. In Utah in particular, there's a decent amount of that in southern Utah, just because there's so many national parks that are there. But there are communities across the country, not a ton, but anywhere that is tourist at all, anywhere that tourists are going to come, having a tiny home community works. So renting those out on a nightly basis, it works.
I got to start doing some math as soon as you leave to see.
We'll make it pencil.
Another great investment for us. Yeah. Tell me about how you went from, what made you go, when you got into building tiny homes, what made you go from building high-end custom tiny homes, which you did for a while, you may still do now, to how do you get to 400, 500 in a year?
A lot of work. There's a huge difference. Building tiny homes is just like any other residential build, right? Like just because it's a small space doesn't mean it doesn't take time. Obviously, it shouldn't take 6 months to a year like your typical high-end custom residential homes would take. But when you're building that home and it's completely custom, you've never built that home before, figuring out the floor plan, the design, and then bringing in the right materials, and then having to change something on the fly definitely takes at least a couple of weeks to do. Not to mention, if you're building it on wheels, you have to have the trailer manufactured beforehand, which can take 3 to 4 weeks in and of itself. So you normally use that lead time to finalize your plans for that home and then get to there. So going through that entire process and doing that over and over and over again, and not really making a large enough profit to see that as being sustainable moving forward, that I could scale that business, that's what made me decide to look into how do I get to the point that I can scale and start building a couple hundred homes. So I went out and found people that are already manufacturing different styles of homes that are that size, that were manufactured in modular homes, went to them with the designs and said, this is what I want to build, but I want to mass produce this. And after meeting with about 30 different manufacturers, picked a couple that made sense, that we were on the same page, and then decided to start building them out and then just lining up customers from there.
Yeah, I love this concept of what you went through. This is going into the business side of just any business, which is you already had a successful business of building custom tiny homes. And you were saying earlier you had a customers in a waiting list trying to get to you to build the custom home. But in that model, you can only build one every 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
You could pump out an entire custom tiny home that you could get out. But then you saw a ton of customers that were not getting serviced.
Yep.
Not just probably with just your personal customers, but your brain has to start thinking there's got to be other ones out there that are not getting serviced either, because there's such a long waiting list.
Yep.
And that's what makes you make this total shift in your entire company.
It was a tough decision for me because, I mean, we kind of consider ourselves a small family-owned business, right? Like my brother-in-law and I. And we're looking at this and trying to decide what's best for the business, what's best for us personally. How do we help the customers that we have now, let alone the customers that we know are sitting out there that want us to be able to help them? There are thousands of people across the United States that wanted a tiny home and couldn't get somebody to build it for them.
It's crazy.
Literally just couldn't find someone that wasn't a year out or 2 years out on their build.
That knew how to build tiny homes.
There are so many horror stories about tiny homes. I've seen them fall off the trailer on the way to a show. I've seen the trailer come unhitched from the car itself.
Yeah.
I've been right behind one that came unhitched as you're cruising down the freeway. There's a lot more that can go wrong than can go right when you're hauling those things. But for me, like the biggest why for me in tiny homes in general, I was lucky enough to be in a situation growing up that I never had to worry about where I was going to lay my head at night. Like, we weren't crazy wealthy or anything like that, but knowing that I was always in a stable and a good position, and knowing what the price of homes were when I bought my first home compared to what they were just a couple years ago, and especially what they are now.
Yeah.
Affordable housing was a very real problem, and tiny homes fit that bill. I really wanted to find a way to help the masses get what they were looking for, because if I can actually help people get homes, it's a home. Like it's not like helping them get a crazy custom car or something that they don't necessarily need, but everybody needs a place to lay their head at night. And a tiny home fits that bill as an affordable house for a lot of people.
Yeah, you think about. I was thinking about what you said earlier, in that most of the world has already gone through the affordable housing crisis, if you will. Like we're hitting it, and we're hitting it in certain cities, right? Obviously, California's and Seattle and New York. But when you travel out there, like you go through England and London and Japan and Singapore, I mean, they all have housing crisis going on, right? The whole country's having a housing crisis. And their natural instinct was to naturally go to tinier houses, and that's what they have for years now. In skyscrapers with literally tiny houses inside of skyscrapers. It's more of a new fad for us, but it's really not a new fad for the world. They're all kind of built for tiny houses.
Yeah, and you solve the problem that's right in front of you, right?
Yeah.
Like it took us a long time because we're a little younger as far as other countries go.
Sure.
And then we have different regulations that a lot of other countries don't have as well, depending on the style of the structure that you want to build. That's one of the reasons I got into container homes was the home was already built. Like I just need to finish the inside.
Right.
And I started going down that road and found out all over the planet there are people that have been building container homes and skyscrapers out of containers forever. Like this is nothing new.
Like full apartment buildings out of literally containers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it was super cool too.
Yeah, I didn't have to reinvent the wheel. I didn't have to do anything that I had tried to do previously. Like I literally just needed to find the right demand for that supply and then tie myself to the right supply in order to get that where I needed to go.
Just talking about storage containers for a second, when it comes to storage containers and tiny homes, is that, I know they kind of all fit underneath a tiny umbrella, if you will. Is that the same buyer, or is it a different style of buyer that would buy a storage container versus a tiny home?
It's definitely a different buyer because the container's not going to be on wheels ever.
Okay.
It's kind of a different mindset, right? Like you still want a small space, but you know you're always going to be in one place.
Okay.
The container you can technically pick up and move again if you ever want to, but normally you're going to put that in place, and that's where it's sitting. The demographics themselves are pretty similar. You don't have a whole lot of people that are like in my place in life, right? Like late 30s, early 40s that have 3 or 4 or 5 kids. They're not usually who you're going after for a tiny home or a container home. It's more of the younger couple that just want a place. They're starting out, don't know where they want to finish school or start a first job. And then the other end of the spectrum of the empty nesters that just don't want the maintenance anymore.
With tiny worlds, if you want to, I call them tiny worlds, it's just tiny home. I don't want to say tiny world, but
You're good.
With tiny homes, when people are wanting to rent those out, let's say in an Airbnb model or VRBO, is that where they're going? Is Airbnb and VRBO, or is there a site that hosts just all the tiny homes across the nation? That if someone wants to go stay in different places, they can go to this Tiny World website or Tiny House.
Dude, you're good, man.
I'm gonna call it Tiny House Movement.
It's been called a lot worse than Tiny World, I can tell you
where
that.
they can just go there and only see all these tiny houses anywhere they're traveling to, or is it all based on Airbnb?
Most of it is Airbnb or VRBO or a listing site like that. There have been a couple people that have tried to come up with an app or a website specifically for tiny homes that are rentals. And there are some really small ones out there, but nothing that's really gained the traction. And it's just so much simpler to list with someone that's already in that space to go with an Airbnb or VRBO or anybody like that.
I want to ask you this question because you talked about when you went from custom kind of homes that you were doing, whatever it may be, 12, 15, 20 homes a year that you guys are custom building to 400 plus houses that you did last year. Okay. Obviously, there's a massive, massive growth model that you guys went through. And I want to talk about how did you acquire those customers? Where did you find them from? How did you go get those customers to go from 20 to 400 plus in a year? Where'd you get them?
The majority of them were customers that I literally already had in waiting, which was kind of what helped push me into that space. Was I already had developers across the country that needed anywhere from 20 to 50 homes at a time and needed to find a way to manufacture those quick because they had land that they were just sitting on and losing money by not having rental properties that were on them. So I compiled that list, and I was sitting on that list for over a year. And that's one of the things that helped me mentally kind of make that switch and make that decision of like, all right, this actually makes sense. I know I'm going to have a ton of legwork to go find these partners. vet them all out, make sure they can actually build what they say, that they stand behind their product, that they can deliver, setting up all the transport for each of those homes, everything else to each individual property. So I had a ton of legwork to do, but for me it was, I had that list already built in, and then I started asking everybody on Instagram, on my Tiny House Movement channel, I just started asking everybody and using them as all the information I ever needed, I got through Instagram.
Right.
Literally everything I needed to know about tiny homes, I got through Instagram. So I started asking customers, asking followers, if you were, if you ever wanted a home or you ever wanted a place that you could rent out, would you ever want to make money with your tiny homes? Okay, great. All those people that wanted to make money with their tiny homes, how many homes do you want to make money on? Okay, you want 2, 3? Great, fantastic. You have, you want to put in your backyard? Sweet. Is there anybody that wants 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 homes? A couple people raise their hand. I go straight to them and ask them how serious they are. And I would go through probably about 10% of the people that actually raise their hand in that scenario are actually serious, right? That have the money in place, they have the funding, they have the land, they just needed the home. And that's who I went to. So I created my funnel through Instagram to get directly to who I wanted that buyer to be, and then just hit them up straight through there to get their email and phone number and go down that road.
Now, obviously, I know you have a fairly large following on social media, on Instagram specifically, though. Your 600,000 plus people follow you on Instagram. And you started using social media a little bit as another business, but also as a way to drive in all these customers. That's where you got all your marketing from. You've never done any like billboards or for Tiny House Movement?
I haven't even run ads on my Instagram page.
Okay.
Like I never went down that road, not because I didn't want to. Like if I had the money in the beginning, I would have done that in a heartbeat. But I started using social media because it was the only free avenue I had to market the home where I knew there were buyers. When I started doing that research, when I really got into tiny homes, I went through every social media platform I could, and Instagram is where I found that there was enough of an interest of people that were at least posting about tiny homes. And that's kind of why I chose Instagram as my platform of choice. Was I knew there were buyers there, and I knew there was interest there.
Yeah.
So if I had the money, I would have done that in a heartbeat. But I've literally never run ads on there. I haven't run ads on any other platforms for tiny homes themselves. It's just been about finding them through that platform.
When you look at social media, because I know a lot of brands reach out to you now to try to help them grow, different large companies, and with really nothing to do with tiny homes, right?
Yep.
I don't want to name any clients you work with, but you got a handful of clients that have reached out to you and wanted you to work with them. What do you see in social media? Do you see it shifting, growing? Where do you see social media heading right now?
A couple of years ago, there was a lot of talk about how social media, and especially influencers in particular, right? Like they were the worst of the worst,
right?
And that fad was going to die from a marketing standpoint. Like nobody was going to be able to use that. People were going to stop following whoever a big name was. I saw the exact opposite. I saw it as this is where everyone is going to want to go, because no matter what you're paying for, you know who the demographic is. You know you can reach them, because the person that you're using as that influencer has the connection with their audience. If they have a genuine following, right? Like it doesn't have to be a cult following, but if you create a following on a social platform, no matter which one it is, those are your people. Like that's who you talk to. Those are your friends, right? So I think the influencer world, I think social media in particular, is one that everyone, I don't care what your business is, as weird, as random as it is, as tiny homes is, as anything else, you have to have your social media set up, because that's how you're always going to be able to connect with your audience. Yeah. And then from there, you get email, you get phone number, you get whatever else that you can control from that point to continue that, so that if one platform dies off or another one comes up, you still have control over who that is. But I think social media is something that everyone should be using to promote their brand or their product.
You think that, I agree with you, and I love what you said earlier, because I think that every company in America, every small business, someone watching right now that's at home and running I don't know, doesn't matter to be a daycare, should have a social media page that they're running, building that brand off of. You said a while ago, do you agree that every business owner should have be using social media right now?
Absolutely.
Is there any reason they wouldn't be?
No.
I'm trying to be devil's advocate here.
Like you don't even, like you can do exactly what I did. Like I didn't pay for anything. Like I literally I went out and I found other Instagram pages that I can collaborate with. The tree houses, outdoor companies, camping companies, anybody that was anything relative to tiny homes. Hit them up through their DM, just ask like, hey, I'm just looking to find a way to kind of get a shout out for a shout out, or some way that we could both benefit from this. I'll post about you, you can post about me. That was literally how that started. So I would work 10 to 12 hours in the shop, and then I would go home and work another 4 or 5 hours specifically on Instagram, hitting people up.
Yeah.
As a business owner, you have nothing to lose and everything to gain, because you can build your entire business, especially now that you can sell a physical product on Instagram.
Right.
You can run your entire business through social media. You don't want that to be the business, but you can definitely run that for free marketing through social.
I'm gonna push the subject a little bit here on you. We're gonna get a little bit political.
Okay.
Obviously, now you have this big thing going on with censorship of these different social media companies and coming out, and of course recently they hit Trump hard and blocked him from all these different sites. I want to get your opinion just on that, just in general. But then you got to look at it from a business standpoint, right? I had a guy ask me I was doing a live webinar, and someone asked me that question, like, well, should I go do my brand on social media because they're going to be censoring, right? But let's first address it from, what do you see with big tech censoring our president? And not what he said was right or wrong, that's not what I'm getting into, but what do you see how that works with big tech censorship?
I definitely have a problem with them censoring somebody for their opinion, right? Like, it's not, and I'm not a political person at all, but there's a lot of struggles that are going to come over the next 2 years in particular with the new presidency, and also with big tech having their hand everywhere. You never want to put all of your eggs in one basket, like the fight between Facebook and Apple right now, right? Like, of being able to opt out. People that are spending millions of dollars on Facebook ads have just lost an entire demographic of who they know they've been able to advertise to,
right? Because
all those Apple users just opted out. So as long as you can use your social in particular to build your audience, do it. Because from there, you can get, the two things that I think we will never have an issue with are email and phone numbers, email and text.
Okay.
If you can build your audience, you're always going to get that information, right? Like, so you have a way to communicate with them. So if you were on, Flip, it starts with a P.
Parler?
Yeah, Parler. Like, if you were on Parler and it goes down, but like that was your main platform, that was the one thing you went to.
Right.
You need to find a new way to communicate with your audience.
Right.
So using those platforms gives you another way to communicate with them. But again, it all depends on how much you want to work at that.
Yeah.
If you just think like, hey, I'm going to make a couple of posts, or I'm going to reach out to this person, or shout this person out, or tag this person, it's not going to do anything. Like, if you don't treat social like a business, it's not going to get built.
Yeah, it seems like, just as going with social, big tech, and culture, it just seems like social media came on the scene with like MySpace however long ago. I don't know, that was early 2000s, right? Did you have a MySpace, by the way?
I did.
Yeah. So you knew Tom.
Yes, Tom was my best friend.
He was your best friend. So, it all comes along, right? Facebook starts growing, and what it was, 2000, I don't know, 4 or 5-ish, it starts taking off, right? And we've grown from Facebook to all these other ones, Snapchat and Instagram and so forth, right? Parler and now TikTok. But it seems like almost as a, what did I say, as a, not a company, but as a, not our culture, our nation. It's almost like as our nation has not caught up enough with rules and laws and how we manage social media, because in the sense of they've taken over like all data, which is what they have, right? It's what they really are. It's this massive data that knows everything about every single person. And it just seems like we're almost like behind where the technology is as humans, maybe. We're behind of how fast technology is moving inside of that world right there, and we're just behind it.
Yeah, I think when social started, nobody thought that it was going to turn into the place that you literally stored all your information.
Exactly.
All of your pictures,
when it first started,
all of your tweets, all your everything else.
Even though from the government standpoint, they just thought, it's just a place where people go and say hello to their best friends and stuff. And it did not turn out to be that.
Because I think everybody saw that as like AOL chat rooms, right? Like, this is just a place you could talk to somebody, and that was it. That's all social media was for. And then it kind of got into pictures, and then building a brand and building a business. All these other things really stemmed off from that. I never, like, when that began, I never would have imagined it was a place that people were literally storing all of their information.
Or literally how the election is marketed to. Like, I don't think anybody thought in 2006, in 2020, this will be the main platforms that people are using to market for the President of the United States.
Yeah.
I don't think that thought ever went through our heads 2005, 6, 7, but it's the world that we live in now.
Yeah.
And now it's almost like they're so far past us. The social media companies are so far past where us as humans are. It just seems like we're like 20 years behind them right now. That's where, to me, where it gets scary at.
They definitely process information much quicker than we do.
Yeah.
Like, growing up, when somebody was running for president, you would see a TV ad or a newspaper clipping or something else for that. And now if somebody's running, they can buy whatever ad they want on whatever platform they want. And if they have the money, they're in your face 24/7 because everyone's on their phone 24/7.
Yeah, it's changed so much of our world. Talk about, just real quick, if someone wanted to be an influencer, I mean, you gained 600,000 followers, right? If someone's out there and they're trying to figure out, how do I become an influencer, how do I become a brand, what would you kind of tell them on maybe the steps of how to become an influencer?
If I was gonna do it all over again, I would tell you to be hyper focused on one subject. If it's you, like if you're trying to build yourself as the brand, awesome. Market yourself as that person. Whatever it is that you're trying to do as a coach, as a business, even if you're trying to do something goofy on TikTok, right? Like whatever your brand is, be hyper focused on that. The other is find who to collaborate with.
Okay.
Doesn't matter what the platform is. If you can add value to somebody else's brand on that same platform, they'll work with you all day. There's no reason not to. Everybody kind of wants something, right? If you're willing to give up your time and your effort to help somebody else build their brand, they'll return the favor. So I would do those two things. I would hyper focus on one specific niche that you want to be, whoever that is, and then I would find and do your homework on who you want to collaborate with.
So if I put it in letters, it would be hyper focus on content and collaboration.
Yep.
CC, content and collaboration.
Yep.
Yeah, I think looking back, even my own brand, like one of the mistakes I made was years ago when I was getting into it, was going way too wide. And trying to be like a lot of things to a lot of crowd, versus just, like you're saying, hyper focus on this one concept, this one content, and hammering that one content over and over and over, like you have with Tiny House.
Yep.
It's like you do Tiny House and you also do Large House. You just do Tiny House.
Yep.
And that's your brand. That's the one that you run with and pound that content over and over and over. And then the collaboration part, I think, is a piece where a lot of people miss out on, is collaborating with others, because most people want to work with. When you're in the industry, in your business, a lot of times they want to work with you. It's a benefit to both sides, basically.
Absolutely. Especially if you're looking for content. Like if you're not the one always creating your own content, you got to find it and you got to go out and search for that. So if you have someone that's willing to bring you content that's relative to what you do, why in the world would you not take that? Especially if all you're doing in return is tagging them in a post or shouting them out in some way. It can mean the world to that person.
Right.
Like when I first started out and I have 100 followers, if I had a page that had 1,000 followers that was willing to shout me out, that was everything. Like I thought I was on top of the mountain.
Right.
And like now, one of the things I do with my page is I look for builders that haven't, quote unquote, been discovered yet, and try to find the homes that they're building so I can shout them out so more people around the country can find them, because people have no idea who they are. They might be in some random place in Minnesota that no one's ever heard of, and they haven't hit the scene yet, but they build an awesome house.
Where do you see Tiny House movement going next 3 years? Where are you taking it?
I see it moving more into the affordable housing space, trying to solve more of the affordable housing space as opposed to just featuring tiny homes, whether they're on wheels or where they are. I really want to be an avenue for people to help solve as much as you can, right? Like it's not like I can do that all myself, but I want to build as many affordable houses as possible. That's really where I want to take it.
The affordable houses are tiny homes?
Yeah.
Or are you just taking the finances and money from tiny homes and building regular houses?
I'm not going to get into building regular houses. One, I'm not a licensed contractor, so doing that myself isn't going to happen anymore. But really, it's going to be providing a way to line up the customers with myself as a manufacturer and with other manufacturers. Just really trying to find a way to solve affordable housing.
The theme of Tiny House, though.
Yeah.
With trying to solve the affordable housing crisis we have.
Yep.
In tiny houses.
Yep.
You think you could put tiny houses, like I think about a lot of the rentals in the past that I've owned in inner cities and so forth, right? And you think you could, is it possible to go into some of those inner cities and build out, like just straight up build tiny houses and use those as affordable housing in those inner cities?
There's
or
actually
be too complicated for the families.
No, I don't think it would be complicated for that. Like the only complication to tiny homes really is zoning. I mean, aside from like financing, which is a whole other rabbit hole, right? Like the only two complications to tiny homes is zoning.
Yeah.
Which you can solve if you're not building it on wheels. If you're just building a small home on a plot of land, on a foundation, some cities have a minimum square footage that you might have to hit. But other than that, there's nothing really tricky about it. You're just building a house that happens to be smaller than the average.
I gotcha. I want to ask you the question about money is, which the whole reason we started this show, like a business owner, so many people that watch right now are business owners, and they're chasing the American dream still, and they're trying to get to it. And Money is show was created as a way to figure out, why do you really want money? Because as you have found out in business, dude, business is tough. and it is brutal concept. And I love the story going back even to your father. It's like, dude, yeah, sometimes you have to put everything on the line and refinance the house and put everything you've ever worked for up on the line to go take that shot. And unless, in my opinion, teaching it for so long, unless you really know why you want to go do that, there's too many reasons for people to quit as soon as it gets tough in business.
Yep.
And you see so many entrepreneurs and business owners get into it, they have this idea, and then next thing you know, they're out and they're chasing another concept, chasing another concept, chasing another concept. I don't think the concept is where they're lacking. I think it's understanding why they're really trying to accomplish this. And unless that reason is a true reason of why you want money, you will always find a way to quit because, dude, business will kick you in the teeth. For the fun of it, it will come in and kick you in the teeth.
Yeah.
And you have to know why you're grinding, why you're out there putting everything on the line into it. So when we started Money is Show, I asked everybody that I've ever interviewed the simple question of, and being a branding guy, which I know you're a branding guy, when we got your picture, I wanted to make sure you put your brand. So your little brand is going to be on the wall from here on out.
Nice.
And but you get your photo here. I want you to fill it out, answer it. Don't tell me what the answer is. Just kind of fill it in here, and then sign it right here, and then show it to me, and then
Okay.
I'll talk to you about what money is to at Tiny House Movement.
That's awesome,
There
man.
you go. It's a good photo of you, man. We had to Photoshop it, but don't worry about it.
Yeah, no big deal. That's kind of my life.
Yeah. Got it?
Yep.
All right, man. Let's see what it is. Oh, man, I love it. This is my favorite part of the show, dude, because I get to see all the new answers.
Yeah.
And I'm always excited when there's a brand new answer. Mainly for the crowd and the viewers and people get to define it differently, but also on a personal level for my wall. I love having new answers. You go walk down the wall. There's like, for those that haven't been here, there's like wall of money is signs, and this is a really good one and a brand new one. So for Brian Hawkins here, the answer is money is the beginning. Money is the beginning. So let's break it down, man. What does money is the beginning mean? Why'd you put that?
So for me, like, I've had so many different times in my life that I've failed, right? Like financially, things haven't worked out or haven't been where I wanted to be. And until recently, I always looked at money as what you were kind of, you know, like you always have your why of your family and everything else, but money was what you were working for. You were kind of trying to trade your time for money. But a few years ago, I really finally was able to conceptualize that it is literally the beginning. Like if I want to be who I want to be, if I really want to bring, let's say, affordable housing to the nation, right? Money is going to allow me to get there, not because I have to have all the money in the world, but it's going to allow me to free up my time to go do what I really want to do, which is focus on that one thing, on affordable housing. So to me, money is literally just the beginning of the journey to allow me to be who I want to be and go where I want to go. Until then, I'm always so focused on that has to be the means to an end to just provide for the family or to go on the vacation or anything else. And thinking of it as the beginning helped me understand it's literally just the way for you to start the real journey that you want to go on. Like everything else you've done up to this point, all the other failures, all the LeBron James cards I've ever sold like an idiot, all that kind of stuff, right? Like anything else I've ever done has put me in that position where I'm finally at the point that I can use that as the beginning as opposed to the end or a means to an end.
Yeah. No, dude, it's a great answer. And when you wrote it, I was hoping that's where you were going with it because I almost think that's one of the main reasons of why I started the whole Money Is show is the answer that you gave right there. Because I think so many entrepreneurs look at money, myself included when I got started, the money was like where I was headed. I felt like that was the target, if you will. That was the finish line in this business and so forth, or whatever business I was doing. In reality, money is not the end of the game. The money in your definition here is just the beginning of it. It's not the end goal you're trying to get to. There's something, there has to be something past the money that you really want to go accomplish and go do. And if you don't know what that side of it is, and that's also what I think gives you the actual real drive, not money. Because at the end of the day, dude, money's paper, and it's a monetary thing that you're not going to take with you. There's got to be something deeper in it. And I think your answer, dude, is like literally the reason I started the whole show. And no one's ever said it the way that you said it, but dude, it's a great answer.
Thank you. Dude, I appreciate you having me, man. And even having the show itself, like I've watched episodes, and it's fantastic to be able to talk about these kind of things, right? Like normally all I talk about is tiny homes and like how to build one or why anybody would ever want a tiny home, that kind of thing. But to talk more of the financial side of it and the business side of what tiny homes are and what that can represent for people is fantastic, and it's unique within that space.
Yeah, I love it. And going back to your answer over time is like, it's funny because anytime I've ever interviewed anybody that's successful on the show, there's always these common denominators that I look for of successful people. And one of them is exactly what happened on the show. It happened sometimes on the show live, and it happened today, which is you actually knew the reason behind money before you knew the answer, basically. Or more, you had it more in focus than the answer itself of money, meaning that you had this bigger, way bigger driving force of solving affordable housing, which was this real engine fuel, gasoline, if you will, that drives you. Nothing to do with actual money or monetary gain. It was like, no, dude, there's a way bigger side of it behind here that drives Brian Hawkins, not money. And I think anytime I find successful people that come on this show, so many of them, not every single one that come on the show, but so many of them, that's the common denominator, is that there's something way deeper, and they know what it is without even like, there's no thought behind it, meaning they got to think about it or figure it out. They'll normally naturally just kind of say it on the show, and I think you said yours on the show as well, and I love that's the whole reason why we have the show, man. Very good. Solving affordable housing with tiny. I never saw that one coming either. With tiny houses. Great one, man. Great one. Brian, I love having the show, man. Has awesome time on the show, and hopefully we'll have you back on the show. Maybe shoot some stories with you or play pickleball. I think you're about to take on some pickleball.
Definitely try that.
And I think I can beat you. Not because I'm better, just because you tore your ACL like 9 months ago.
No big deal.
So I feel like I got a leg up on you here.
Quite literally, yeah.
Quite literally a leg up on you. But we'll go figure it out and see if we can play some pickleball and have some fun, man. So those watching, I hope you enjoyed the show. Follow us next time on The Money Is Show.